Hello, investigators, and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Veronica. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this video, I'll be going over one of the new investigators shown in the announcement article for the Scarlet Keys expansion by FFG, Amina Zidane. This will be the first of a series of 3 videos that I hope to bring out over the course of the coming week. One for each of the 3 new investigators. In addition to Amina, we also have Carson Sinclair, the butler, and Asmodee released the image for Kimani Jones, the security consultant, on their website. This is what I consider a legitimate source, and so I think it is okay to talk about. But before I talk about anything else, I do actually want to quickly mention leaks. There have already been some leaks for the Scarlet Keys, which I find slightly disappointing, and I know that might sound hypocritical coming from me, because I believe I was probably the biggest distributor of leaks around the time of the Investigator starter decks. To note, I have never leaked anything firsthand. I was always carrying things from somebody else, things spoiled in Discord most of the time that I then put in a video and released for other people to watch. But I have decided with the new release model to change the way that I am viewing leaks, which is to say I will not be looking at leaks myself, and I will also try not to discuss leaks on my channel. And the reason for this is twofold. The old release model was very self-contained, only about 12 player cards in each pack, so even if a pack got leaked completely, that usually only meant 6 cards, maybe 7 cards, because a lot of the cards would have been in the announcement article already, and so very few cards, relatively speaking, were leaked. And usually leaks also only happened when stores broke street date, which wasn't that common. It wasn't that big of an impact. But these days, the new release model, if a box gets leaked, it is a huge upset, right? There are hundreds of cards in there, and the potential for one leaker to leak a box ahead of time and cause massive amounts of information to get released, that just sucks, right? I don't like that. And the reason why I don't like that, or a big reason why, is apart from just ruining the wait and the anticipation, there's also the fact that FFG is really trying to push content creator previews. And I know this is a little selfish coming from me, because I have done a preview card for Edge of the Earth, and I'm hoping to do one for the Scarlet Keys. So yes, obviously I care about this more than most people maybe do, but I also think it's fair that it would really ruin the fun for me, and I know it ruins the fun for other content creators when their cards get leaked. When they talk about a card that's been leaked already, well, they kind of have to pretend that it didn't leak and just, go along with it, but I know it takes the fun out of them. So I'm really hoping to, avoid leaks myself, and if you haven't made up your mind yet, you haven't seen any of the leaks yet, I'm asking you to consider not looking at the leaks, right? Just enjoy the preview season. I think FFG taking the preview season more serious and pushing content creator previews and more articles and stuff like that is only going to work if it doesn't get undercut by a massive leak. So I'm just making an appeal here. I'm not saying you have to. I'm only asking you not to put anything on my channel that leaks anything. Otherwise, I'm okay with it, right? If you want to go and watch the leaks, I'm not going to get mad at you. You can do that. But please respect it for everybody else who chooses not to indulge. And if you haven't decided yet, maybe don't. The card will get released eventually, right? You'll have fun looking at the box and opening it for the first time. So thank you. Now we can move on to what I'm actually here for, which is Amina Zidane, the operator, our new mystic, who is a chosen and cursed traded, 3 willpower, 3 intellect, 3 combat, and 3 agility. 5 health, which is very low, the lowest we get, but 9 sanity. So she has this very one-sided health sanity pool, and a very, very powerful reaction ability. When you play an asset, reduce its resource cost by 3. It enters play with 1 doom on it. Limit once per round. This ability is a lot. I immediately want to compare her to Jenny Barnes, because she has the same stat line, 3-3-3-3, but all Jenny does is get 1 additional resource during each upkeep phase. Amina potentially gets 3 resources around. That's a lot. Now, obviously, there's a drawback there. There's doom there. We'll get to that, but I think just want to put that number out there, right? This is potentially 3 times as much as Jenny gets. And then we have an Elder Sign effect, +2. You may move all Doom from a card at your location to another card at your location. It took me several read-throughs to realize that it doesn't actually say player card or asset or anything like that. It just says card. So if you have an enemy at your location, you could move the Doom from one of your assets to that enemy, kill that enemy, Doom is gone. You could move it from to a treachery that sticks in your play area or your threat area. And then when that treachery goes away, the Doom goes with it. There are a bunch of, I think, cool effects, and there are, of course, a few Mystic cards that can help you get that Elder Sign. So I actually think this is a really powerful Elder Sign. It's tricky because it's hard to play around drawing that Elder Sign consistently, but I think when you do, it might just change the game. Alright, so we do not have Amina's deck building yet. I believe it might have been leaked. I don't know. I haven't checked all the leaks, but if it has, please don't tell me. All that we have are her signatures. So I will be treating her basically like she has like Mystic access and neutral access, because I just don't know what else she could take. So if you're watching this in the future and you do know her deck building, or you check the leaks, just sorry that I'm not mentioning maybe some really good combo cards for her. I am just going off of like Mystic and neutral cards to keep it simple. We do have her signatures, and I believe we expect her to get one of each. I don't know if we know for sure that, but we have Word of Weal, Word of Woe, and Deafening Silence. Word of Weal is a 0-cost event. It's her deck only. Fast. Play when you perform a skill test on an asset with 1 or more Doom on it. Add your willpower to your skill value for this test. Then, if Word of Woe is in your discard pile, you may shuffle it into your deck. I think this is a pretty neat little fact. Getting +3 on any skill test is, or well, not any skill test, but getting +3 on a skill test, quite powerful. It doesn't cost that much, and note that the card Word of Weal puts the card Word of Woe back in your deck, and vice versa, as we'll see in a moment. In fact, let's get to that right now. Word of Woe is a 2-cost event. They are both pact traded. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. It's her deck only. Fast. Play only during your turn. Place a Doom on an asset you control to resolve an action ability on it, ignoring all costs, including its action cost. Then, if Word of Weal is in your discard pile, you may shuffle it into your deck. So these two kind of combo. One of them lets you put Doom on an asset to get a free action. One of them lets you use your willpower if there's a Doom on the asset. So pretty nice little 1-2. And in general, these two effects seem quite potent. I think Word of Woe is a bit expensive. 2 cost for an extra action is a lot, but if you're using any kind of spell, then you're also ignoring charge costs. You don't have to exhaust anything. It seems pretty good. I'm going to have to see how this plays out in practice. The fact that they shuffle each other back in seems kind of interesting, because it lets you do this loop where as your deck gets thinner and thinner, you get to hit these more and more and just keep using them, which seems quite powerful. Bonus actions is pretty good. But then, of course, we also have her weakness, Deafening Silence. It is an omen. It's a treachery. Revelation. Move 1 Doom from an asset you control to the current agenda. This may cause the current agenda to advance. If no Doom is moved this way, shuffle Deafening Silence back into your deck. And it has some very cryptic flavor text, which I love. So I don't know quite how to judge this one. I think it's pretty punishing, and I think it's part of the reason why Word of Weal and Word of Woe shuffle each other back in, is to make it so that once you've hit Deafening Silence once, you can try to delay shuffling your deck as much as possible. Because one of the things that I'm about to talk about is when you're trying to use Doom on your assets as a Mystic, you really want to avoid it actually counting against the Doom threshold. You want to cheat and basically get that benefit, but not get a drawback. And Deafening Silence basically says, nah, we're getting that drawback. Which, yeah, I mean, that sucks, but weaknesses suck. That's what they do. And I think one of the important things here is that it's not hurting you, it's not dealing you damage or horror, and it's not really adding another Doom to the table. It's taking a Doom that you maybe had plans for to get rid of and putting it on an agenda where you probably can't get rid of it. So that's a setback, but weaknesses are meant to be bad. And I don't think this weakness makes her unplayable. Let's put it that way. Let's just say it's a weakness that I think you can manage, but we'll have to see how bad it gets. Moving on. So we have Amina. and her ability is reduce your asset cost by 3, getting a big economic advantage, but we have to take Doom for it. And that isn't great if that Doom is actually counting against the agenda, because very few assets are going to be worth 3 resources less trading for a round, right? Like the costing an entire round is a lot. Now, not every game of Arkham goes until the final round, but a lot of the time you don't really want to be making that trade. So what we really want to do is cheat the cost, like a good Mystic does. And so for that, I've picked 4 categories of things that you can do with it. You can play cards that specifically remove Doom. You can use assets that discard themselves to be used. You can play assets that can take damage or horror or use slots. And you can use cards that discard other assets. Now, obviously, these are not mutually exclusive. Probably you want to be having a couple of each of these in your deck. Some of them might end up in your deck anyway. But let's talk about these categories and let's think in these categories to help you play a Doom-based Mystic. Now, this has previously been the terrain of Marie, and I actually just played Marie the other day, and I think she's very powerful, and I suspect Amina will be even more powerful than Marie, so I'm pretty hyped for her. As we're talking about cards that specifically remove Doom, I think the one that is immediately going to jump them out for most people is Moonlight Ritual. This spell/insight from Dunwich costs 0 and removes all Doom from one card you control. And I think this is a pretty good effect that you're probably going to be running in Amina a bunch of the time because you will probably put additional Doom on your cards. But it's worth keeping in mind that if all you're doing is using her ability to reduce the cost of an asset by 3 and then using Moonlight Ritual to get the Doom off, basically what you've done is turn Moonlight Ritual into emergency cash, which isn't the worst, but it's not that fantastic as far as using your investigator ability goes. So what you really want is using Moonlight Ritual to remove multiple points of Doom because you've done more with that asset than just putting 1 Doom on it to reduce the cost by 3. That being said, I suspect Moonlight Ritual will be a powerful tool in an Amina deck. Just make sure that you're really getting the most out of it. What else we could use are 2 of the new cards from the preview, the Ceremonial Sickle and the Dowsing Rod. The Ceremonial Sickle is a 0 XP, 3 cost asset with a combat icon in Mystic. It is item, charm, weapon, and melee traded. It takes up a hand slot, and it has an action, fight. Either use your willpower or get +1 combat for this attack. When you initiate this ability, choose 1, exhaust Ceremonial Sickle, and place 1 Doom on it to get +1 skill value and deal +1 damage for this attack. Or, if this attack defeats an enemy, remove 1 Doom from Ceremonial Sickle. And then we have the Dowsing Rod. The Dowsing Rod is a 0 XP, 4 cost asset with an intellect icon, item and charm traded. Action, investigate. Either use your willpower or get +1 intellect for this investigation. When you initiate this ability, choose 1, exhaust Dowsing Rod and place 1 Doom on it to move to a connecting location, or if this investigation discovers the last clue at a location, remove 1 Doom from Dowsing Rod and it takes up a hand slot as well. These 2 are obviously made with Amina in mind. They are expensive assets, which you can get down for very cheap with her ability, and then they have a built-in ability to get rid of the Doom that it places. So, for example, if you play the Ceremonial Sickle for 0, and then use it to quickly finish off an enemy that maybe was engaged with another investigator, so you could play this, move over, and stab it, then you are basically getting the Ceremonial Sickle for free. That seems very good. I think the Sickle is not something that blows me out of the water right away, and the main reason for that is that by default, you're only getting the +1 combat or using willpower, and you're having to put additional Doom on it to deal more damage, but then you're also needing to defeat enemies to remove Doom from it, which gets kind of tricky if you can't reliably have an enemy around. That being said, in certain scenarios you'll almost always have an enemy around, and this is where cards like Moonlight Ritual potentially come in, where you could use Ceremonial Sickle multiple times in a row to deal multiple 2 damage attacks with extra skill value, and then use Moonlight Ritual to quickly clear all of that off, and that's probably worth it. I think the Dowsing Rod is the stronger of the two by far. The ability to get additional moves is very powerful, especially in true solo. And the fact that neither of these take up an arcane slot is very notable. The fact that you don't have to be contesting your arcane slots with this. And you're just getting extra compression, right? The extra free moves is better in true solo than additional clues, because a lot of the time there will only be a single clue on a location. So getting to move turns you into, as compete, well, Duke lets you run around the map and pick up clues. One thing that I think is very much worth pointing out for both of these is that if you are not using willpower, you get a stat boost. And for Amina, who has 3s in all of her stats, you'll almost always want to be using the other stats. So combat for the sickle and intellect for the Dowsing Rod. And to me, this hints that Amina's expansion, or well, the Scarlet Keys, might finally be giving us some Mystic cards that reward you for not using your willpower. Mystics using willpower has been a theme for basically the entire duration of the game, but it's gotten a little bit boring occasionally. Maybe that's just me, but I feel that Mystic as a class are about taking risks and about this exciting messing with forces beyond your comprehension kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of the spells do lean into that, having drawbacks and being interesting, but sometimes it does feel a little bit like we want to get a little bit more risk in there, right? A bit more scary. And I think playing with Doom is definitely that. And I think both of these cards really encourage different kinds of Mystic play than we've seen in the past, and I'm very excited for it. I think the Dowsing Rod especially is very powerful. It's small, it's subtle, but keep in mind that you're not paying the price for that Doom, because you're just going to use the second ability or the second mode of that ability to get rid of the Doom, and then you're done. You don't need anything else. You're just getting free moves and then investigating, which you were going to do anyway, which is great. I love this card. I think it's quite good. I think it's expensive, which, Amina doesn't care as much about. Other investigators, you're maybe, having to figure out if you can afford to play these, but yeah, they're good. Oh, and before I forget, because I almost forgot, these are both charms. Charm is a trait on, I want to say Antiquary, but let me look that up real quick. So I looked it up, and it's not Antiquary, it's Sleuth, but it's one of the three class assets, talents from Edge of the Earth. And it's one that I think hasn't really received a lot of love, because there weren't a lot of charms that cost a lot of money and or triggered skill tests, and these are both, right? So if you're playing a Sleuth deck, or more specifically, if you're playing a deck that wants Sickle and Dowsing Rod, you may also want to upgrade into the Sleuth and then use it to boost your skill test, because these are only giving you a +1, which, isn't going to blow everything out of the water, and also to discount the cost of these assets, if you're not Amina, who, doesn't care as much. Moving on from cards that specifically remove Doom, we get to assets that discard themselves on use. So here we see just a couple of examples that I grabbed. This is not a super broad category, but it has quite a couple of cards in there. We have Talisman of Protection, just a little 2-cost asset that when you are assigned damage or horror that would defeat you, you can discard it to cancel up to 2 damage and horror. And you can play it under control of any investigator. So this is a neat little Amina trick. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the names. Amina could play this for 0 under the control of somebody who's about to get defeated, and then they immediately use this, the Doom goes away. Grota Statue, similar sort of idea, 3 cost, takes up a hand slot, and whenever you would reveal the Chaos token, spend a charge to reveal 2 tokens, but when it is empty, it discards itself. So you just plop one of these down, get 3 tests with extra tokens, or any other effect that cares about tokens, and then the next thing you know, it's gone, and you had to pay 0 for that effect, and the Doom is not staying around. Finally, and perhaps most risky, is the Seal of the Seventh Sign. It has 7 charges. It's a 4-cost, 5 XP thing that seals the autofill, and it has 7 charges. If the charges are gone, or if it leaves play, it removes from the game. And then when you reveal a skull, cultist, tablet, or other thing, you remove a charge from the Seal of the Seventh Sign. So this is a very powerful effect that you could potentially play for only 1, but you're now kind of gambling on the fact that you will be revealing 7 of these special tokens before the Doom will cause you to advance. Risky, but potentially very potent if you manage to pull it off. I look forward to people trying that. I think it is going to be a neat strategy, and yeah, like there's a big economy discount there. Next up, we have kind of an extension of the previous category, assets that can take damage or horror or use slots. Basically anything that has ways of getting discarded. Any ally, I've got David Renfield here because he's kind of a familiar face, I think, for Doom-based mystics. You can put Doom on him to get resources, he gives you +1 willpower, and then he has 1 sanity, so you use a card like Forbidden Knowledge to take a horror at a strategic time, kill Renfield, and not worry about the Doom. And I also looked through some neutral cards for this thing, the Bulletproof Vest, which is a 2-cost asset that takes 4 health soak. Amina has a pretty low health value, so getting to play this for 0, having it take a bunch of hits, and then disappearing before the Doom causes you any trouble seems like a fantastic play pattern. And then we finally have cards that can discard other assets. I think the classic one is Sacrifice. This 0-cost 1 XP event lets you discard a mystic asset you control, and then you either draw 3 cards or gain 3 resources or do a combination thereof. Sacrifice sounds maybe bad because, draw 3 for 0 isn't... Like, that's actually pretty good, but having to sacrifice or discard an asset is bad unless you want to be discarding that asset, which is, of course, the reason why we care about this card. We have an asset with a bunch of Doom on it, and we want to get rid of that thing. Now, there is another card from the announcement article that also discards an asset, which is the Summon Servitor. However, as you may immediately notice, there's something funky going on with this one, where it doesn't have a normal XP circle, and it has the new customizable trait. I'll be going more in-depth on the customizable trait in a future video, probably the Carson one, because I think this video is going to be complicated enough as it is. But it's worth saying that as of right now, we do not have the rules for customizable yet. There's been a lot of guesswork, and I'll be going into some of the speculation in that next video. But I'm just going to keep it simple for now and focus on the parts of the text that matter for discarding other assets, which is that this is a 2-cost asset, a summon, that takes up an ally slot and an arcane slot, and has the text, as an additional cost to play Summon Servitor, you must discard another asset you control. So here we go. If we have an asset of any kind that has a bunch of Doom on it and we don't want it to cast the Agenda to advance prematurely, we can just play Summon Servitor and take care of it. No problem. And then it has this ability where it enters play at your location. This is super cool. I think it's kind of neat that we have this summon that can act independently because it can take 1 action during each of your turns, which is not one of your actions. It's taking one of its actions. And it can use this action to move Summon Servitor to a connecting revealed location. And then it does what exactly? Well, nothing by default, but this is where the customizable keyword comes in. We don't know the rules yet, and I'm not going to go too far into it, but what we can see is that it can get for 1 box, and we kind of assume, based on the wording in the article, that 1 box equals 1 XP. We don't know how exactly you spend it, but we do know that that's kind of a benchmark we can use, at least. And so Armored Carapace, for example, gives it a health value of 3, and then it can be assigned damage and damage dealt to any investigator at its location. Likewise, for example, the Dreaming Call upgrade has 3 boxes, so probably 3 XP. Instead of discarding that asset in order to play the Summon Servitor, we may return that asset to its owner's hand. Now that might sound like a lot of XP for discarding a thing to returning a thing to hand, but I want you to imagine this line of play. You are Amina, and you have a Summon Servitor and a Clairvoyance in hand. Clairvoyance being a 4-cost mystic asset that lets you investigate and get 2 clues per investigation. It has some other text as well. You play that for 1 with your ability, putting a Doom on it, and then investigate 2 more times. Next turn, the Doom doesn't cause any problems with the agenda. On your turn, you investigate with it again, and then play the Summon Servitor, returning the Clairvoyance to your hand. You have now paid 1 in order to investigate 3 times with the Clairvoyance, getting potentially 6 clues. That's crazy good, right? That's the kind of thing that really is the kind of combo play that I want to be doing with Amina, where returning that Clairvoyance to your hand now means that you can play it again, potentially in the Witching Hour, keeping in mind that Anytime that the agenda is about to advance next turn anyway, you can use Amina's ability freely because it doesn't matter how much Doom is on the agenda when it advances, you're just going to push past it and clear all the Doom anyway. So this seems like a very powerful playstyle, and I expect the Summon Servitor will be used in that capacity, where you're just putting maybe Dreaming Call and maybe something like the Armored Carapace for like a cheap way to bounce an asset and replay it. And then some other investigators will be instead buying all of these actions that let them do skill tests, as well as maybe removing the slot. Because we don't really care about the slot if we're just using it to sacrifice an asset. If you're going for the sacrifice route, you probably want to play actual sacrifice, but the fact that this is in the box is of course important. Not everybody has every pack and sacrifice from Forgotten Age, so maybe you don't have that. I've talked about a bunch of ways to manipulate Doom. I do want to just mention the last Mystic card in the box, Power Word. It is a spell event with an intellect icon. It has customizable as well. It is fast, play only during your turn, attached to a non-elite enemy at your location. And then you have an action. If the attack's enemy is at your location, you can parlay, meaning it does not provoke attacks opportunity, to give it a command. The limit once per round per command. Go. This enemy moves once in the direction of your choice. Or cower. This enemy exhausts. There are a bunch of additional commands that you can purchase with XP. Things like Betray, that let it do damage to other enemies. Mercy, which let it heal. Confess, which let it get you clues. Distract, which lets you evade. And then a bunch of more crazy mystic effects, like Greater Control, which lets you return it to hand. Tongue Twister, which lets you double up the amount of commands you may give. And Try Spoken, which I think is probably one of the coolest, which lets you include 3 copies of Power Word in your deck. And when you give the command using 1 copy, it also affects every other enemy with a copy. So you can have just this little hit squad of 3 enemies. In its base form, it reminds me a lot of the card Bind Monster, albeit much more action intensive, because keep in mind, every time you want to cower the enemy, you have to spend an action, which is like not unplayably bad, but it's very slow, because you're going to be spending a lot of actions on that. But I suspect that as you spend more XP, and especially when you get those Tongue Twister or Try Spoken upgrades, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be really action efficient to actually lock down all these enemies without having to spend a bunch of time fighting, a bunch of skill tests, because that's one of the things that makes this card so interesting. There's no skill tests here at all. Everything is just automatically successful, basically, which means that it's actually quite powerful in dealing with things in a very surefire way, right? If you know that you have a Power Word on an enemy, you can always make it exhaust, assuming it's not elite. The 3 cost on this is very expensive, and Amina cannot discount it because it is an event and not an asset. But if you have all that extra economy anyway, because you've been using her ability a bunch, then this is a great way to spend some of that extra money. That's Amina in a nutshell. I think I've described her a lot. I think she's an interesting investigator with a lot of depth and a lot of piloting skill required to make the most out of her ability. But I do think she's going to be one of the more interesting mystics we've seen in a long time. And I really hope she'll live up to the hype, because I would really love to see a new kind of mystic who doesn't rely on their willpower to do things. And we've only seen hints of that in the past. And I really hope she can make some of those old cards really sing. I'm also quite excited for all the other cards in the box. Of course, keep in mind that we haven't seen most of this box yet, and there's a lot of Mystic cards in there, plus whatever off-class she might be able to take. So the speculation had only begun, right? There is so much more tier crafting and power to be put into her. Don't worry if you're a little skeptical as of yet. There's more to come, I'm sure. I want to thank you for watching. This has been super fun. And I'm really looking forward to doing the next video about Carson Sinclair the Butler. If you want to chat with me, you can of course always put a comment, and you can join the Discord at discord.gg/missilesbusters. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.